What abducts park rangers in U.S. national parks? 3 unexplained cases. They're the guardians of America's wildest places, trained to handle treacherous terrain and survive the harshest conditions. But what happens when the guardians themselves become the hunted? When some park rangers walk into the woods and are never seen again? Today, we're digging into 3 of those cases. The National Park Service has thousands of rangers protecting America's natural treasures. They're law enforcement, medics, firefighters, and survival experts all rolled into one. They know the land they patrol inside and out, a landscape that's often as dangerous as it is beautiful. But even with all their training, some rangers have vanished under the most disturbing and bizarre circumstances. These aren't simple stories of getting lost. These are cases that defy logic, that are starved for clues, and that raise unsettling questions about what's really out there in the quiet corners of our nation's parks. Disappearances like these are rare, but when they happen, the official files stay open for decades. Theories pile up, from tragic accidents to animal attacks, to foul play spilling over from the human world. And when there are no answers, darker possibilities begin to take shape. We're going to explore 3 of the most perplexing cases of missing park personnel in U.S. history. These are men who knew the wilderness better than anyone, yet the wilderness, or something in it, claimed them. We'll look at the facts, the searches, the strange clues left behind, and the questions that haunt investigators and families to this day. Section 1. The vanishing of Paul Fugate. Our first case starts in the southeastern corner of Arizona, at Chiricahua National Monument. Known as a wonderland of rocks, the park is a maze of towering volcanic spires called hoodoos. It's a landscape that's both breathtaking and bewildering, a 12,000-acre labyrinth of stone. This was Park Ranger Paul Fugate's territory, and on January 13, 1980, it became the scene of his baffling disappearance. Paul Fugate was 41 years old, a seasoned naturalist and ranger. He wasn't a rookie. He was a thoughtful man with a biology degree and a deep love for the natural world. Friends described him as a bit of a rebel who didn't always see eye to eye with the Park Service bureaucracy. He'd even been fired once over his long hair and mustache, but sued to get his job back, and won. This tells you he was a man of principle, not the type to just walk away from his responsibilities. January 13, 1980, was a quiet Sunday. Fugate was the only ranger on duty at the visitor center. Around 2 p.m., he told a seasonal clerk he was heading out for a routine hike to check on a nature trail. His instructions were simple. If he wasn't back by 4:30 p.m., she should close up for the day. He stepped outside in his green and gray Park Service uniform, complete with his badge, and was last seen walking down the path. He didn't take his radio. Paul Fugate was never seen again. When 4:30 came and went, the clerk locked up as instructed. No one was alarmed at first. But when Fugate didn't show for work the next day, a sense of dread took hold. A massive search was launched, one of the biggest in Arizona's history. Search teams on foot, on horseback, and in helicopters scoured the 12,000-acre park. The terrain at Chiricahua is brutally complex, a chaotic mess of canyons and forests that can easily hide a person. For weeks, they combed the area, and they found nothing. Not a single boot print, not a scrap of clothing, not one trace of Paul Fugate. It was like the ground just swallowed him up. As the search dragged on, investigators started to believe this wasn't an accident. Fugate knew the park too well. A fall bad enough to incapacitate him should have left some kind of sign. The complete lack of evidence pointed to something more sinister: foul play. Theories began to fly. One of the strongest was that Fugate had stumbled upon something he wasn't supposed to see. Back in the 80s, southeastern Arizona was a corridor for drug smuggling, and the park's remote landscape would have been a perfect spot for illegal activity. Did Fugate walk in on a drug deal? If so, he wouldn't have been a lost hiker. He would have been a federal officer who'd become a witness, a threat to be eliminated. This would explain why no trace of him was ever found in the park. Some unconfirmed reports seem to back this up. A few park employees later mentioned seeing suspicious tire tracks and signs of a struggle on a dirt road near where Fugate was headed. Even more chilling, one employee claimed to have seen Fugate slumped between two men in a pickup truck that afternoon, though law enforcement could never verify the sighting. Another theory, pushed by the National Park Service initially, was that Fugate had just walked away from his life. Given his past issues with authority, maybe he'd had enough. But this never felt right. He left his wallet and all his belongings behind. He never touched his bank accounts. Plus, he fought hard to get that job back. Abandoning it made no sense. For years, this official stance caused his wife, Dodie, immense pain, as the NPS terminated his employment and denied her his pension. It took until 1986 for them to change his status and release his survivor's benefits. Years went by. The case went cold. Then, in 2018, something shifted. Citing new, unspecified information, the National Park Service tripled the reward for information about Fugate's disappearance to $60,000. This move, nearly 40 years after he vanished, suggests investigators may have a new lead. The Cochise County Sheriff's Office joined the plea, a clear sign that they believe someone out there still knows what happened. Today, Paul Fugate's case remains one of the most haunting cold cases in the National Park Service. He is the only Park Service ranger to have ever disappeared on the job and never been found. Did he meet with a tragic accident? Was he silenced by criminals? The total lack of evidence leaves every door open, but most investigators believe he met with foul play. He remains a ghost in his own park, a chilling reminder of the dangers that can hide in America's most beautiful places. The complete void of evidence in Paul Fugate's case is what makes it so baffling. Our next story is different. This time, the ranger was found, but the clues discovered with him only made the mystery deeper, creating a puzzle that blurs the line between accident, intention, and something much stranger. Section 2. The Enigma of Randy Morgenson. Next, we head to the massive granite peaks and deep canyons of California's Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. This is a land of giants, giant trees, giant mountains, and a sprawling, lonely backcountry. It was the workplace and lifelong passion of Randy Morgenson. At 54, Randy wasn't just a park ranger. He was a legend. With 27 years of service, he was one of the most experienced backcountry rangers in the entire system. But in the summer of 1996, during a routine patrol, this veteran of the mountains vanished, kicking off a mystery that would take 5 years to reach its baffling conclusion. Randy Morgenson was a complicated, poetic soul. He had an almost spiritual connection to the mountains, but he also grew tired of the careless tourists who trashed the pristine wilderness he worked so hard to protect. The life of a seasonal ranger was also wearing on him. No job security, no retirement, no benefits, and reapplying for his own job every single year. The summer of 1996 was a tough one for Randy. He and his wife were separating, and he was in the middle of personal turmoil. His journal entries from the time show a man feeling isolated and questioning his life. On July 21, 1996, Randy headed out from his remote cabin for a standard multi-day patrol, leaving a note saying he'd be back in a few days. He was due to check in by radio on July 24th, but the call never came. For a ranger as punctual as Randy, that was an immediate red flag. What followed was a massive search, an emotionally charged hunt for one of their own. Nearly 100 people, helicopters, and dog teams searched an 80-square-mile area. They knew Randy's habits, his favorite spots, how he moved through the land. But heavy rains had washed away any tracks, and after 7 grueling days, they found nothing. The search was called off, and Randy Morgenson was presumed dead, lost somewhere in the vast Sierra wilderness. Without a body, theories ran wild. Had Randy's depression led him to walk away? A letter from him arrived at his wife's home postmarked after his disappearance, which seemed to support this, since there was no mail service in the deep backcountry. Foul play was considered, but seemed unlikely. An accident was the most logical answer. But for a ranger of Randy's skill to just vanish without a trace felt wrong to everyone who knew him. For 5 years, the wilderness held its secret. Then, in July of 2001, a trail crew working off-trail found a tattered piece of a ranger's uniform shirt. Nearby, they found a weathered backpack and, partially submerged in a creek, a hiking boot with a human leg bone inside. Dental records confirmed it. They had found Randy Morgenson. The official conclusion was a tragic accident. Investigators believe he fell through a snow bridge while crossing a creek, broke his leg, and was swept away, his body hidden by rocks and ice for all those years. A sad but seemingly clear end to the story. But then, the search team found one more thing. At the top of the waterfall, a good distance from where his pack and remains were, lay his park-issued radio. This one discovery blew the case wide open. First, the radio wasn't broken. It was tested and worked perfectly. Second, the power switch was in the on position. Rangers who had searched that exact spot in 1996 were sure it hadn't been there. So, the questions started piling up. If Randy had a fall that broke his leg, why was his radio, his lifeline, at the top of the waterfall while his body was at the bottom? Why didn't he call for help? And if the radio was on, why did no one hear him? The radio's placement makes the accident theory feel incomplete. If he'd been swept away, his gear should have been with him. Its location suggests it was placed there deliberately. But why? This is where the theories get darker. One possibility is that Randy, in despair after breaking his leg, decided not to be found. He might have crawled to the edge of the falls, left the radio where it would be found one day, and let himself go over. This aligns with his documented depression and a cryptic final radio message he'd sent to 2 other rangers. "I won't be bothering you two anymore." But many of his friends and colleagues refuse to believe it. They say Randy was a survivor who would have fought to live. They argue it was just a tragic accident, and there must be some other explanation for the radio. The mystery of Randy Morgenson isn't if he died in the wilderness, but how and why. Was it a simple accident? Or was it an intentional act? A broken leg points one way. A working radio, switched on and left far from the body, points somewhere else entirely. His story is a wilderness paradox. A man who was found, yet whose final moments are more lost than ever. The cases of Paul Fugate and Randy Morgenson are built on ambiguity. One vanished into thin air, the other left behind clues that created more questions than answers. Our final case, though, leaves no doubt about what happened, but it swaps that mystery for another: the motive. This isn't a story of a ranger claimed by the wild, but of a man executed within it. Section 3. The Execution of Armin Johnson. For our last case, we go to the Big Island of Hawaii and the dramatic landscape of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. This is a place of creation and destruction, where molten lava meets lush rainforest. But in April of 2005, this paradise became a crime scene. Unlike our other cases, there's no question what happened to 44-year-old Armin Johnson. He was murdered. The mystery that's lingered for nearly 2 decades is who did it and why. Armin Johnson wasn't a traditional park ranger, but he was a fixture of the island community with ties to the park. He was a man of many talents. He moved to the Big Island from Seattle in 1984 and truly embraced the aloha spirit. With a degree in sports medicine, he worked as a massage therapist, a volunteer athletic trainer, and a therapeutic aid for children with autism. He was maybe most famous as the host of a popular weekend reggae show on a local radio station, where his magic personality made him a local celebrity. By all accounts, Armin was a kind, generous man who touched countless lives. On April 13, 2005, a visitor to the park made a horrifying discovery. About 100 yards off the highway, lying in the volcanic terrain, was the body of a man. The victim was quickly identified as Armin Johnson. An autopsy revealed he died from a single gunshot wound to the upper back and neck. The evidence showed he was killed right where he lay. It wasn't a dumping ground. There was no attempt to hide the body. This wasn't an accident. It was an execution. The National Park Service and the FBI launched a homicide investigation, but the case was a complete puzzle from the start. They had a victim everyone loved and no obvious motive. Who would want to execute a man described by everyone as gentle and positive? Investigators looked into every corner of Armin's life. He had no known enemies, no criminal record, and wasn't wealthy. The cold-blooded murder just didn't fit the life he led. They explored a possible connection to the island's drug scene. As some friends said, Armin occasionally used drugs recreationally. But could that have led to an execution? Friends felt it was a stretch. His casual involvement didn't seem to fit such a violent end. As one retired police sergeant said, everybody loved him, and that was the central problem. Another strange piece of the puzzle was Armin's car. His old, beat-up car was missing and has never been found. Was it a carjacking gone wrong? That also seemed unlikely. An execution-style shot isn't typical for a random robbery. But the missing car remains a huge loose end. Did the killer use it to escape? Does it hold clues? No one knows. The case went cold. There were no witnesses and no useful physical evidence. In 2015, a decade after the murder, the FBI and NPS announced a $10,000 reward for information. The FBI special agent in charge said, "We are hoping that the passage of time may embolden a witness to come forward." That reward is still active. Armin Johnson's case is a brutal outlier. He wasn't lost to the elements. He was targeted and killed by another person. The park was just the backdrop for the final act of a story we don't know the beginning of. Someone walked Armin Johnson out to a secluded spot and ended his life. That person then vanished, taking the reason with them. They've kept their secret for almost 2 decades, leaving a community to grieve a senseless act of violence. Armin's killer is a ghost, a chilling testament to the fact that sometimes the most dangerous predators in our national parks walk on 2 legs. The empty trails of Chiricahua, a waterfall gorge in the High Sierra, and the volcanic slopes of Hawaii. 3 completely different landscapes, tied together by 3 deeply unsettling mysteries. We've looked at Paul Fugate, who walked into a maze of rock and never came back. Randy Morgenson, the wilderness pro whose body was found with clues that only deepened the puzzle. And Armin Johnson, the beloved local executed in paradise for reasons no one understands. These men were guardians of the wild, but their stories are a stark reminder that even expertise can't always protect you from the unpredictable forces of nature or the calculated violence of human beings. These cases remain open, files filled with theories, but no answers. They are part of a small, haunting group of National Park Service cold cases that linger in our minds and fuel a persistent sense of unease. What is happening out there? Is it just the vast, indifferent wilderness? Are these men stumbling onto dark secrets, drug runners, poachers, or other criminals using our parks to hide their work? Or is something else at play? The truth, for now, remains buried in the same wildlands these men gave their lives to protect. The investigations into the deaths and disappearances of Paul Fugate, Randy Morgenson, and Armin Johnson are all still active. They haven't been forgotten. What do you think happened? Share your theories respectfully in the comments below. If you have any information, no matter how small you think it is, about these cases or any other cold case in a national park, please reach out. You can submit an anonymous tip to the National Park Service Investigative Services branch. You can call or text the tip line at 888-653-0009. Your information could be the key that finally brings answers to these families. Thank you for watching.